So we're all using it, right? But how does it actually work? That's what we're doing today. We're pulling back the curtain on ChatGPT. We're going to break down how it learns from this huge ocean of public data all the way to the private answers it gives you. All right, let's get into it.
You know that feeling. You type a question into that little box, hit enter, and you just kind of wonder, what is actually going on inside its brain? Like, how's it coming up with this stuff? Well, that's the big question we're going to tackle today.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll cover what ChatGPT even is. Then the big one, how it learns. After that, we'll look at the data it's trained on, what that means for your privacy, and finally, the rules of the road that govern all of this. Sound good? Let's go.
All right, first things first. What is ChatGPT? And you'll see pretty quickly, it's way more than just your average chatbot.
Okay, so at its heart, ChatGPT is an AI service. Its whole job is to understand what you're asking and give you a good response. And it does that by learning patterns from, well, a mind-boggling amount of information. We're talking text, images, even audio. But here's the really crucial part. It's not just fetching information like a search engine. It's actually figuring out the relationships between all those pieces of data.
Okay, which brings us to the main event, right? How does all this learning actually happen? Let's really dig into the process behind the magic, behind those predictions it makes.
Believe it or not, it all boils down to something that sounds pretty simple, just predicting the next word. So think about a sentence like this one. Instead of turning left, she turned what? The model gets trained over and over and over again to just guess that next word. Is it right? Maybe around or back? It's all about probabilities.
So this whole thing is basically one giant feedback loop. It starts by just churning through millions of sentences, images, you name it, and it's looking for patterns, like which words tend to show up together. And every time it finds one of these patterns, it makes a tiny adjustment to millions of little internal knobs or weights. It's this constant fine-tuning that makes it get better and better at guessing what's coming next, whether that's a word or even the next pixel in an image.
And this is a really, really important point because it gets at a huge misunderstanding. ChatGPT is not a search engine. It's not just a giant database of facts, and it's definitely not a copy and paste machine. Think of it more like this. It's a pattern recognizer. It takes all those patterns it's learned and uses them to generate something brand new. It's a synthesizer, a content generator.
OpenAI has this great analogy that I think really hits the nail on the head. Think about a fantastic teacher. They don't just memorize the textbook and spit it back out, right? No, they understand the connections between all the different ideas. That's what lets them explain things in a way that just clicks. And that's pretty much how the model works. It's not memorizing the source material, it's learning the web of relationships between all the concepts within.
Okay, so if the whole thing is about learning from data, the obvious next question is, what data exactly? Where is all this information actually coming from?
Well, it turns out it pretty much all boils down to three main sources.
Okay, so here they are. First, you've got publicly available information from the internet. That's the big one. Second, there's information that's licensed from third parties. And third, there's the data provided by users like you and me, and by human trainers who are constantly helping to fine-tune the model's performance.
Now, it's really important to know that they don't just unleash it on the entire internet and hope for the best. It's not a free-for-all. They actually use a bunch of filters to try and screen out the stuff they don't want the model to learn. We're talking about things like hate speech, spam, and this is a big one, sites that are basically just designed to aggregate and post people's personal information.
And all of this naturally leads to the question that's probably on a lot of your minds. Okay, but what about my data? What about my privacy? So yeah, let's get right into it and tackle that head on.
So let's just ask the question directly. Is personal information from the internet used to teach ChatGPT? The short answer is yes, it can be. But, and this is a huge but, the nuance here, the why and the how is what's really important.
This table does a great job of breaking it down. Look, a ton of stuff on the public internet just happens to have personal information in it. So the model sees this and it uses it to understand things like language patterns. For example, how a name usually works in a sentence, or how to recognize a public figure. But what it is absolutely not used for is to build a profile about you. It's not used to target you with ads, and they're certainly not selling your personal info. The whole point is to understand language in the real world, not to learn about private individuals.
And really, that's the single most important takeaway here. The entire reason for using this kind of data is just to improve the model's core abilities. Prediction, reasoning, that kind of thing. It is not a tool for gathering intelligence on private individuals. Period.
Now, of course, you can't just do all this in a vacuum. There are rules, there are laws. So let's take a quick look at the legal side of things.
So under major privacy laws like the GDPR over in Europe, the legal justification they'd use for processing all this public data is something called legitimate interests. And what that basically means is that they're making the case that the benefit to society from creating these powerful AI tools is a legitimate reason to use the data, with the big caveat that it has to be done responsibly and always respect individual rights.
And that legal framework isn't just for the companies. It also gives you specific rights. You have the right to object to your personal information being processed. You can go to OpenAI's privacy portal and make specific requests. Now, it's true, some of these rights aren't absolute. There can be other lawful reasons at play, but you always have the right to take your concerns to your local data protection authority and lodge a complaint.
So let's just recap real quick. ChatGPT learns by recognizing patterns, not by memorizing things verbatim. And yeah, it does come across personal info on the public web, but the goal is always to make the model smarter, not to build files on people. And this all happens inside a legal framework that gives you rights. So that kind of leaves us with one big final question to chew on. As AI gets more and more woven into the fabric of our lives, how are we, all of us, going to keep drawing that incredibly important line between what's considered public and what's truly private? That's a conversation we're all going to be a part of.